Remnant from the Ashes set the stage, but it's Remnant 2 that looks to catapult the Souls-like with guns into the mainstream. My name is Codiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're checking out 5 big changes coming in Gunfire Games' upcoming sequel, Remnant 2. We've been holding our breath, patiently waiting for what I can confidently say is one of our most anticipated games of 2023, Remnant 2. There's still a lot of unknowns, a lot of mystery surrounding the game, and as avid fans of Remnant from the Ashes, I think it's only fair we take a hard look at some of the things that held Gunfire Games' first title back, and confront the reality that Remnant 2 could very well be the smash hit of this year. Usually we're not so bold in our assessment of a game ahead of launch, and of course, we'll be objective when reviewing the game. But there's also something to be said about our confidence in the developers and the content they've already released that's got us convinced the team is on the right track. With all that in mind though, let's dive in. A lot can be said about Remnant from the Ashes' linear approach to the gameplay experience. It wasn't as on the rails as some other games, but from a story and narrative perspective, things played out in a predictable and consistent way. Remnant 2's first real upheaval of a major system really revolves around playthrough diversity, and there are a few key things about the new game that we already know. First is that world generation is being massively overhauled. Much like a rogue-style game, the world itself is generated each time you zone in for the first time. Being that Remnant 2 is a Souls-like with guns, the idea of randomly generated worlds might sound a bit counterintuitive to the genre the game is so intimately linked to, but with level replayability as a huge aspect of Remnant 2's gameplay loop, this is essential to keeping things fresh. Where this gets interesting is when you consider the game's story. There is no linear storyline in Remnant 2, but there is a story through line connecting everything together that will come to a head in a culminating ending. One unique change is that each biome will now offer multiple independent storylines, meaning after multiple playthroughs, you still likely won't have seen everything that each zone, each world has to offer. Add in the multiplayer factor and consider this. 5 friends could all play separately on the same map and never have the same experience. Something called injectables furthers this idea by enabling an RNG overlay that has the potential to tack on additional dungeons or encounters on top of the already random major and minor dungeon experiences. The next change is rather straightforward, but if you're coming from Remnant from the Ashes, you'll appreciate how big of a deal this one is. One of the most impactful changes coming to Remnant 2 is the removal of armor set perks. Weight and armor rating will still matter, but no longer will the potency of an armor set dictate your playstyle and fashion choices. This is huge because, unlike the first game, players won't feel compelled to use the armor that's considered meta, and that onus is now placed within other systems, giving players that much-needed flexibility that was a clear issue in the first game. Now, don't panic, that doesn't mean the game is getting simplified. In fact, quite the opposite is happening. Because everything revolves around non-armor items and individual character progression, that also means your choices at the beginning of the game don't lock you into a playstyle or experience you might want to move away from during your progression. Flexibility is a beautiful thing, and with so many new options on the table, it was a necessity for Remnant 2 to take that seriously. Enter archetypes. Now you can learn a whole lot more about this system in our Remnant 2 Ultimate Preview video that will be released on the channel, but for today, let's keep things high level. Archetypes are essentially classes, and they're tied to magical items that you can socket. On the left, you have a prime archetype, and on the right, the sub-archetype, giving players access to 2 distinct classes that they can then use to form a hybrid loadout. Archetypes come with their own unique trait, perks, and skills, and while they can't be altered, they can be improved through a leveling system. Once you cap out at level 10, that archetype trait becomes unlocked for use within other builds. There are, of course, some nuances around this, but again, we're keeping things high level. If you know Souls games, or if you're coming over from Remnant from the Ashes, then you understand that build diversity is a foundation for this game. The first game did an okay job giving players that freedom to play how they wanted, but as with most games, the meta restricted a lot of personal choice. And while you could argue it was never forcing players to adapt to a certain playstyle, when you're talking about a game as relentlessly tough as Remnant from the Ashes, it was hard to argue that the meta was almost a necessity to beat some of the most challenging content in the game. This time around, Gunfire Games aims to give players a lot more freedom and flexibility with their build, and as such, I think it's worth looking at how many choices players will have access to. In terms of accessories, players will be able to equip 4 rings and 1 necklace, 2 more rings than was possible in Remnant from the Ashes. As we touched on before, armor no longer has set bonuses and now only informs your defensive and resistance ratings, as well as weight class, which influences your dodge mechanic. Also, as we just discussed, archetypes give players access to special perks, special traits, and special skills, and the dual archetype system compounds that. Before, in Remnant from the Ashes, you had your 3 weapons and 2 mods that functioned as abilities. Now you have 3 weapons with 2 mods, 1 mutator on each weapon, 2 active skills, 1 from each archetype, giving you essentially 4 active skills. Relics, or Dragon Hearts as you might know them, are now customizable and aren't always just about healing. Relics can be enhanced with up to 3 relic fragments to add additional effects to their use. One huge change is that traits are now limited and players can only allocate 85 points into the trait system within the game. This means builds will need to be carefully planned out, and the ability to roll through content as a near godlike human is most likely no longer a thing. Once a player levels up their archetype to max, that archetype trait becomes available for use in the general trait pool, which will be massively beneficial when building out a character. In terms of flexibility, the trait system can be respected at any time for a nominal scrap cost. Shifting gears to the action, let's talk about combat. There's a lot that feeds into the general idea of combat when it comes to Remnant 2. Weapons, gear, abilities, enemies, you get the point. But more broadly, combat is receiving significant improvements and changes. For example, let's talk about Gray Health. Damage you take will now convert 50% of the damage you take into Gray Health. This will allow the player to recover that portion naturally over time, or lean into builds that play around the Gray Health system. There also looks to be a huge focus on melee weapons and playstyles in Remnant 2. The team is injecting a huge amount of new melee weapons into the game. Melee weapons, alongside ranged, will also get mutators, which we believe will enhance the combat in a specific way, although no details are currently available about this system. There are a slew of new melee types and attack animations, as well as dedicated traits, archetypes, and more to augment melee playstyles. Another quality of life change is that stamina will no longer be a burden outside of combat. Stamina only drains during combat, but players will have to manage it much more carefully than in Remnant from the Ashes. Because you only get so many stats now via the trait system, a player's jewelry choices and knowledge of mechanics plays a larger role in maintaining your stamina. Consider also archetype skills and how that impacts combat. These give you 2 more active abilities separate from your 2 mod powers. These are potent and can swing fights in your favor when used appropriately. A huge change is that boss encounters are going to be much less ad dependent. These fights will now be more about skill and encounter knowledge, and the development team is going to rely less on overwhelming the player or team with exterior forces. To cap this off, we can't forget about the loads of new and revamped weapons. In addition to the dozens of weapons you'll find while exploring the worlds, there are tons of starting weapons to choose from right from the start, giving you options to fit any playstyle. Finally, let's discuss the world, as it'll be a dangerous and intertwined part of our Remnant 2 experience. As we just said, stamina consumption now only matters in combat, which means exploration should no longer feel like a burden. The team has also completely revamped the map, introducing a new 3D map, which makes routes and objectives more clear. Fog of War has also been reworked and is more readable so players can see what they missed. Confusion over height maps is no longer an issue. Finally, the map will display objectives and even collectibles once you've seen them. The game as a whole will also be more exploration-based. Secrets are hidden everywhere. Jars and boxes will no longer drop a noticeable amount of resources anymore, which means finding chests and secrets becomes more valuable than simply smashing everything in sight. These chests will now be randomly hidden throughout each biome that award generous amounts of scrap, upgrade materials, and more, depending on the rarity of the chest. This puts a premium on exploration and ties directly into your progression. Having a curious mind isn't just about completing achievements, but actually advancing your character and uncovering new items and upgrades that will aid in your game progression. We also know of numerous worlds, some old and some new. Earth, Geisha, Losum, and the Labyrinth have all been confirmed. We're confident there's more to come, and while the team is keeping things close to the chest as we approach the July 25th release date, we're sure to learn more. There's no doubt in my mind everything we're learning about Remnant 2 is an improvement on the base game, and while we haven't gone hands-on quite yet, we've spoken to the team directly and worked with them to understand some of the game's main systems that will drive Remnant 2 forward. As you can probably tell, Remnant 2 is different in a lot of ways, and we think that's a good thing. With so much hype around the Souls genre thanks to games like Elden Ring, we're excited about the possibility of an entirely new crop of players checking out Remnant 2. Friends, you better believe we'll be covering this game top to bottom when the time is right. If Remnant 2 is even remotely on your radar and you want more videos like guides, boss breakdowns, and more in your feeds, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. I also want to invite you to join the Legacy Gaming community on Discord. It's a fantastic place to hang out, party up for all things Remnant, and meet a ton of cool people interested in all types of games. So check out the link in the description below. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.